What's going on, guys? Dare here with Fantasy Football Advice, coming at you with another fantasy football video. Today, it's Monday. You know what time it is. It is time for the waiver wire video. I will say overall, outside of a few major injuries, the waiver wire this week, it's going to be a little bit quiet. A lot of the same names that we've seen over the past few weeks. But before we do get into exactly those players, let's go over the stat of the day. Yesterday's stat of the day was which tight end leads the league in average separation. The correct answer was Rovert Tonyan. Joaquin Cortada, you got this one right. As for today's stat of the day, which wide receiver currently leads the league in percentage of team air yards? Once again, that's which wide receiver currently leads the league in percentage of team air yards. Leave your answer in the comment section down below. We'll be happy to let you know who wins in tomorrow's video. Also, guys, with every news blurb altering the value of these players, if you want to stay fully up to date on how we value each player on the waiver wire, consider signing up for our website. That's thefantasyfootballadvice.com. Not only will you gain access to all of our waiver information, but you get access to the trade model, our weekly rankings, DFS picks, sports betting picks, and more. So if that interests you, once again, go to our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. Link for that, as always, in the description box below. We're going to hop right into the running backs, and we'll start with the high ownership running backs. To lead this list, of course, Mattison, if you guys did not know, he is the backup for Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook, who has been pretty injury prone throughout his career, has been rather sturdy as of late. Unfortunately, though, he was knocked out of this game on Sunday. Now he is currently pending an MRI, and this will leave Mattison as the lead back in this backfield. This is a very, very valuable backfield to have the lead back on. Mattison is also a very talented rusher as himself. He can run, he can catch. So although we can't expect full Dalvin Cook type production from him taking the place of him, this is still a player who can possibly post high in RB2, back in RB1 numbers for the entire time he is leading this backfield. Mattison only owned in about 42% of leagues, so while he will be owned in a lot of competitive leagues, there still is a chance that you can get him out there on the waivers this week. Behind Mattison, we have Chase Edmonds, a familiar name in this waiver wire video we've been posting. And it's because, once again, Chase Edmonds has now outproduced Kenyon Drake. He's getting the more valuable touches out of this backfield, that being the receiving work out of the backfield, a lot of the design plays going to the running back in the red zone, which are leading to more touchdowns. And even though Kenyon Drake has once again dominated in rushes out of the backfield, this is still another week where Chase Edmonds has put together the more productive fantasy day. At this point, not only is Chase Edmonds flex viable while Kenyon Drake is healthy, but if anything were to happen to Kenyon Drake, the overall value and expectations we have for Chase Edmonds on a week-by-week basis, they are virtually going to skyrocket. The final high ownership running back we have is Justin Jackson. This is being recorded before the Monday game, but we do expect Justin Jackson to take over a significant role paired with Joshua Kelly. As we know, Austin Eckler still expected to miss time. In the meantime, Jackson and Kelly, they will be splitting the touches. How exactly that split is going to shake out, that is a different question. But we do know that Joshua Kelly, he has had some fumbling issues, some his fault, some not his fault. So that could lead to more overall field time for Justin Jackson. Jackson currently owned in 51% of leagues, so another situation where he's most likely owned in the competitive leagues, but for almost half of you out there, he is available on the waiver wire. Moving over to the low ownership running backs, and this week should be held as a reminder to start grabbing those handcuffs. Guys, you are not required to grab the handcuff of the running back you own. Yes, if you were a Dalvin Cook owner, I'm sure you would love to have had Mattison on your bench, but that doesn't mean you need to grab the handcuff of the running back you own. Anyone who owned Mattison is going to be rewarded for stashing them on the bench. And the first player we have listed up here as a solid handcuff is, of course, Tony Pollard. He is the backup for Ezekiel Elliott. He's only owned in about 24% of leagues. If anything were to happen to Zeke, Tony Pollard would come in as an every week start. Now, I know Dak Prescott is going to be out for possibly the entire season at this point. This is overall going to be a downgrade for the effectiveness of the offense, but but it's very likely that they could focus on the running game, try to take the ball out of the hands of Andy Dalton. While Andy Dalton is a capable passer, he's a backup for a reason. If they focus more on the ground game, slowing the game down, that will allow more touches out of this backfield, more opportunities for Ezekiel Elliott, and potentially, if Elliott did go down, more opportunities for Tony Pollard. Once again, Pollard only owned in about 26% of leagues, so definitely you guys have a shot at nabbing him off of the waivers. Behind him, we have Giovani Bernard. This is a player I know a lot of you can get out there, so if you guys are talking about how none of these players are ever able to be nabbed off the waivers in your league, well, Giovani Bernard, he's only owned in about 6% of leagues. Joe Mixon is getting a workhorse type share of the volume out of this backfield. Giovani Bernard, though, has still been very involved, especially in the receiving game. Giovani Bernard, if he did have to step in, if anything were to happen to Joe Mixon, he is a very capable 3-down back. Yes, the Bengals, they're not coming off of their best offensive performance. In fact, it was likely one of their worst of the season thus far, but that should help you in making sure that you are able to get Giovani Bernard off of the waivers, because there should be a very small amount of competition for you. Behind him, we have Benny Snell. Benny Snell is currently owned in about 14% of leagues. You could also use this to tie in Anthony McFarland. I know Anthony McFarland has been peppered in as well, but from what we've seen behind James Conner, Benny Snell has looked like the backup behind him. Benny Snell, as we know, he is a capable rusher as well as a pass catcher. Definitely not to the extent of James Conner, but when you're getting a backup, that's usually what the trade-off is. Anthony McFarland is definitely a player you could grab if Benny Snell is already owned. Benny Snell has not done enough throughout his career from what we've seen to automatically lock himself in and not think he could be overtaken by a player like Anthony McFarland if Anthony McFarland was outproducing him. So definitely another name to throw in that hat. James Conner himself, he already brings in one of the highest injury risks that there is for any starting running back. So taking a shot on Benny Snell or Anthony McFarland, it does have a pretty significant chance of paying off for you. The final running back we have is Brian Hill, and I know there may not be a ton of upside for the rusher in this offense. Todd Gurley as the starter is hardly posting top running back numbers, but in the limited action that we've seen from Brian Hill, he's looked really good. In fact, better than Todd Gurley. And if you actually look over the past 3 weeks, they've been giving more and more opportunities over to Brian Hill. This does indicate that he could potentially carve out a role for himself while Todd Gurley is healthy, but from what we do know, he is a capable backup if anything were to happen to Gurley and if he were to go down. That's it for running backs. Nothing too crazy there, but let's move over to the wide receivers where we have a wideout who went completely bonkers this week. Yes, I'm talking about Chase Claypool. Chase Claypool completely popped off against the Philadelphia Eagles. He had 7 receptions for 110 yards, even notched 3 receiving touchdowns. That was on 11 targets, but he didn't end there. He also had 3 carries out of the backfield, even scored with one of those as well. So 4 total touchdowns. And while yes, we can't expect to have crazy games like this coming from him every week, but Deontay Johnson, he actually left the game early in the first half due to injury. Deontay Johnson has had a pretty injury-riddled sophomore season as it is. At this point, we're not sure exactly when Deontay Johnson will return, but even if Deontay Johnson doesn't return, Chase Claypool could potentially have some flex starter value. But while Deontay is out, this is a guy potentially we could be talking about in that wide receiver 3 category. Right now, Claypool is only owned in about 9% of leagues, so if you're one of those teams that are thin at the wide receiver position, I would do what it takes to get Claypool on your team. Behind him, we have Travis Fulgham. He is of the Philadelphia Eagles, currently owned in 0% of leagues, so I don't care how thin your waiver wire is out there. Travis Fulgham is a guy you can get. He has now scored a touchdown in back-to-back games, looked pretty good in doing so. This is a sophomore player, not a rookie, but one that has played well in every opportunity he's been given. The only thing going against him, of course, is first of all, this offense, it just really doesn't look all that good. Yes, he's been producing against some of the top-tier defenses, that being San Francisco and now Pittsburgh. So the chances of him producing against the easier defenses, yes, that does increase, but with a player who's remarkably unproven, we really don't know what we're going to get long-term from him. Also, the receivers on this team are going to begin to get healthy. We have Deshaun Jackson, Alshon Jeffrey, who was actually held out due to illness, not listed as being held out due to injury. So we can assume that a lot of the pieces that are around him right now and the level of talent that's around him, it is going to increase, thus limiting the overall opportunities for him moving forward. What we can say though is that what he's already done has proven enough to warrant an add-off waiver wires, even if it's speculative, not somebody you need to automatically thrust in your lineup, but somebody you should be keeping an eye out for nonetheless. Behind him, we have Henry Ruggs. He is owned in a pretty significant amount of leagues, 48%. Any leagues with deep roster spots or deep benches, he may not be available, but he did come off of a very good performance this week. After battling injury and not really sure if he was going to even see the field time, he notched 2 receptions for 118 yards, even scored a touchdown. Keep in mind though, this was on a mere 3 targets. Typically, I do like to have players that are receiving a high amount of volume. When you do have a player like Ruggs, who is extremely fast and can consistently win on deep routes, then the volume, it isn't necessarily a requirement, just something nice to have. Performances like this though, they aren't going to be few and far between, so as long as he's healthy, he is definitely a player that will be in that flex conversation. Behind him, we have Preston Williams, currently owned in about 38% of leagues. I'm not super thrilled about Preston Williams and his season-long value, but from what we know, he is trending upward. Not when it comes to his overall target market share. He's been seeing about the same amount of targets he has been from the beginning of the season, but for a player who is coming off of a torn ACL, especially a young one, it could be very likely that he's finally starting to come into his own, feel very healthy, and this is where we can start to see all of his stats start to pick up along with that. He posted 4 receptions for 106 receiving yards and 1 touchdown. This was on a mere 5 targets, so definitely a good performance, not one we should shrug off. So if he's available on your waivers and you have a spot to burn, look Preston Williams' way. The final player we have is Laviska Shenault of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's currently owned in about 31% of leagues, and all I have to say about him is, guys, this is a top 30 wide receiver that consistently is on the waiver wire. He should really be owned in all leagues. He is extremely talented. Anytime he's targeted, he's looked extremely good with the ball in his hands. He's coming off of a performance in which he's seen his highest target market share of the entire season. That's 8 targets. He converted 7 of those into receptions for 79 yards. And did I mention those 8 targets were for the lead of the team? Once again though, he's only owned in about 31% of leagues. So if he's available on your waiver wire, you might think about getting him because he's only 1 injury away from being an every week starter for your roster. Alright guys, we're hopping over to tight end, and we don't have many players for tight end, but we do have a really big one leading it, obviously Rovert Tonyan. I did yesterday's stat of the day, which was which tight end currently leads the league in average separation. That was Tonyan. So we know this guy is good. He may not be getting the volume, but he's also getting his passes from Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers has been playing on an MVP caliber level. 1 pass from Aaron Rodgers is basically the equivalent of like 6 passes from Dwayne Haskins. We all saw it on full display in prime time. We saw 6 targets translate over to 6 receptions for 98 yards, a whopping 3 receiving touchdowns. And what's not brought up enough is that in the 2 prior games leading up to that Atlanta game, Rovert Tonyan had a touchdown in each of those games. He now has 5 touchdowns on the season. All 5 of those touchdowns came in the past 3 contests, yet he's still only owned in about 48% of leagues. Guys, if he's on any waiver wire, he should be owned. He's currently the number 2 fantasy tight end in all of football. So please don't let that waste away on the waivers, and don't let one of your opponents go ahead and grab him. Up next, we have Eric Ebron. Eric Ebron is definitely a player who's been trending upward, especially in the area of volume. Over the past 3 games, he now has had 5, 7, and now 6 targets, converting that into 3, 5, and 5 receptions. The volume, it's definitely there. Deontay Johnson, as I had mentioned earlier, is out for an undisclosed amount of time. That is going to instantly boost the potential volume he could also be receiving. When it comes to tight ends who are typically touchdown or bust, any boost in volume, that being 1, 2, or even 3 targets throughout an entire game, that could instantly boost the expectation for what he's going to get in the touchdown department. Eric Ebron's only owned in about 37% of leagues, so somebody you could consider streaming or just putting on your bench with the bye weeks coming up. Behind him, we have Cameron Brate. He's currently owned in about 9% of leagues. As we know, OJ Howard, he's on IR, leaving Rob Gronkowski and now Cameron Brate leading this team from the tight end position. Cameron Brate we've known for several years. He is a shark when it comes anywhere near the red zone. And Tom Brady has already proven to be able to distribute the ball to Cameron Brate where he succeeds the most. Yes, the end zone. How high is his overall ceiling any given week? I don't know. He would probably have to score 2 touchdowns to really crack the top 5 because he's not going to be used very much in between the 20s. But regardless, any tight end with his type of touchdown expectancy, they should be owned or at least considered every week. The final tight end we have is Gerald Everett of the LA Rams, and unfortunately this is going to be an impact to Tyler Higbee. It's one that we have no control over, of course, but we have seen the snaps of Gerald Everett virtually increase from week 1 on. Not only have his snaps increased, but his overall involvement in target market share have increased as well, up until the point where we are right now, where Gerald Everett is coming off of a game in which he had 4 targets, converted that into 4 receptions for 90 yards. At this point, we do have to realize that Gerald Everett is not going anywhere. Our high expectations for Higbee, they are going to be clouded by Everett, and if Everett does continue to improve and continue to look as good as he does, we may see even more opportunities shift over to the way of Everett. With Everett only being owned in 1% of leagues, this may be a good opportunity to get ahead of that trend, because for now, he is for free off of the waiver wire and somebody you could get and potentially insert into your lineup. But guys, that's going to do it for the waiver wire video today. We really hope you enjoyed. If you did, how about hitting that like button? If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. We thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.